The Minnesota Timberwolves practice facility hummed with activity as players filtered out after an intense morning session. Anthony Edwards, dripping with sweat, lingered behind to put up a few extra shots. The familiar sound of his basketball hitting the polished hardwood echoed throughout the now emptying gym. "Just 10 more," he muttered to himself, determined to perfect his corner three before calling it a day. As Ant finished his shooting routine, he headed toward the locker room. The hallway now quiet, except for the distant sound of voices coming from around the corner. He slowed his pace when he realized the conversation had taken an unpleasant turn. Man, look at him, 40-something years old and still picking up after millionaires. A voice that Anthony recognized as belonging to a member of the team's support staff said with a snicker, "Should have stayed in school." Hey, Miguel!" Another voice called out loudly to the janitor, "My kids' class needs a career day speaker. Want to show them how to use a mop?" Anthony paused just before turning the corner, his jaw tightening as he heard the unmistakable sound of laughter at someone else's expense. He peered around and saw Miguel, the facility's 52-year-old janitor who had been with the organization for over 15 years. Miguel kept his head down, continuing to sweep the floor methodically, as if he hadn't heard the comments. But Anthony could see the slight slump in Miguel's shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. The man had heard every word. Anthony had always exchanged friendly greetings with Miguel, but realized he knew little about the quiet, hard-working man who kept their facility spotless. What he did know was that Miguel never missed a day, always arrived early and stayed late. He was there before the first player showed up and remained after the last one left. "That's enough," Anthony said firmly as he rounded the corner, his voice cutting through the laughter. The small group of staff members froze, not realizing the team's star player had overheard their mockery. "Ant, we were just..." One began. "Just what?" Anthony challenged, his normally easygoing demeanor replaced by something harder. "Making fun of a man for doing honest work. That's what you were doing." The hallway fell silent. Miguel kept his eyes on the floor, his grip on the broom handle tightening. "Sorry, man," one of the staffers mumbled, not looking at either Anthony or Miguel. "Just joking around." "Doesn't sound funny to me," Anthony replied. He turned to Miguel. "You good?" Miguel nodded briefly. "I'm fine, Mr. Edwards, thank you." The staffers quickly dispersed, leaving Anthony and Miguel alone in the hallway. Anthony watched as Miguel resumed his sweeping, his movements precise and efficient. "Been with the team a long time, right?" Anthony asked. Miguel looked up, surprised at the question. 15 years this March." Anthony nodded, thinking, "I'll see you tomorrow, Miguel." As Anthony continued to the locker room, his mind was already forming a plan. What those staffers didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that Anthony Edwards had grown up watching his mother and grandmother work tirelessly at multiple jobs, often including cleaning and janitorial work, to provide for their family. He'd seen firsthand the dignity in their labor and the disrespect they sometimes endured, and he wasn't about to let that stand in his own workplace. The next day, Anthony arrived at the facility earlier than usual. He made a few calls from his car before heading inside, setting his plan in motion. As he walked through the doors, he spotted Miguel in the main hallway, carefully polishing the glass display cases that housed the team's memorabilia. "Morning, Miguel," Anthony called out. Miguel looked up, surprised to see the young star so early. "Good morning, Mr. Edwards. You're here early today." "Anthony," he corrected with a smile. "And yeah, thought I'd get some extra work in." "Hey, you got a minute?" Miguel set down his cleaning supplies. "Of course." Anthony gestured to a nearby bench, and they both sat down. "Been thinking about yesterday," Anthony began. "That wasn't right. What happened?" Miguel shook his head. "It's nothing. Happens sometimes. Shouldn't happen at all," Anthony replied firmly. "But that's not what I wanted to talk about. Been with the team 15 years. You've seen a lot of players come and go, right?" Miguel smiled slightly. "Many. Some great ones, too. I bet you got stories," Anthony said, genuinely interested. "What was KG like when he was here? For real, not the media version." For the next 20 minutes, Anthony listened as Miguel opened up, sharing insights about Kevin Garnett's legendary intensity during practices, stories about the team during their playoff runs, and observations about different coaches' approaches over the years. Anthony was fascinated by Miguel's perspective, one that came from someone who had observed everything, but remained largely invisible to the spotlight. "You know more about this organization than almost anyone," Anthony said finally. "That's valuable," Miguel shrugged. "Just observations, nothing important." "Disagree," Anthony said, standing up. "Thanks for the talk. Appreciate it." Throughout the day, players and staff noticed Anthony spending more time talking with Miguel. At lunch, rather than sitting with his teammates as usual, Anthony pulled up a chair at Miguel's small table in the corner of the cafeteria, causing heads to turn. By afternoon practice, whispers had spread about Anthony's unusual behavior. Some teammates were curious, others confused. The staffers from the previous day avoided eye contact with both Anthony and Miguel, clearly uncomfortable. After practice ended, Coach Finch called the team together for announcements. As players gathered in a semicircle, Anthony stepped forward. "Coach, mind if I say something real quick?" Finch nodded, stepping aside. Anthony scanned the faces in front of him. Teammates, coaching staff, support personnel. His eyes briefly met Miguel's, who stood near the exit with his cleaning cart, preparing to begin his work once everyone left. "Miguel, can you come over here for a second?" Anthony called out. Looking surprised and slightly uncomfortable with the attention, Miguel hesitantly approached the group. "Most of you know Miguel," Anthony began. "He's been keeping this place running for 15 years. What you might not know is that Miguel has watched every single practice during that time. He's seen more basketball in this gym than anyone else here." Anthony turned to Miguel. "Tell them what you told me this morning about my release point on my three-pointer." Miguel looked startled. I noticed that when you're tired, your elbow tends to drift slightly outward on your release. It's very subtle, but it affects your accuracy on long shots in the fourth quarter." Coach Finch raised his eyebrows, looking at Miguel with new interest. Several players murmured in surprise. "That's exactly what our shooting coach pointed out last week," Finch said. Anthony nodded. "Miguel sees everything. He was here when KG was here, when Love was here, through all the coaches, all the ups and downs. And yesterday, some people thought it was okay to mock him for his job." The locker room fell silent. Anthony didn't need to name names. The message was clear. "Tomorrow," Anthony continued, "Miguel's going to join our film session. He's got 15 years of institutional knowledge that we'd be stupid not to use." Coach Finch already approved it. Finch nodded, adding, "Miguel's perspective might give us some insights we've been missing." As the team dispersed, many players approached Miguel, introducing themselves properly or acknowledging him with new respect. The transformation in how he was perceived was immediate and visible. Later, as Anthony prepared to leave, he found Miguel waiting by the exit. "You didn't have to do that," Miguel said quietly. "Yeah, I did," Anthony replied, "but I didn't do it just for you. Basketball's taught me that sometimes the most valuable players aren't the ones scoring the points. They're the ones making everyone else better. You've been making this organization better for 15 years without recognition. That changes now." 3 weeks later, the Timberwolves were in the midst of their best stretch of the season, having won 7 of their last 8 games. The locker room atmosphere had transformed, with a new sense of unity permeating the team. Miguel had become an unlikely but valuable addition to their film sessions. Twice a week, he would join the team, offering observations that sometimes contradicted conventional wisdom, but often proved insightful. His unique perspective, coming from someone who had observed thousands of practices and games without the biases of a coach or player, provided a fresh viewpoint that both Coach Finch and the players had come to value. More significantly, Anthony's actions had rippled throughout the organization. Other facility staff members who had previously been treated as invisible were now acknowledged and included. The culture was shifting, becoming more respectful and inclusive at every level. Before a crucial home game against the Denver Nuggets, reporters noticed something unusual during warm-ups. The entire Timberwolves team was wearing shooting shirts with "Team Behind the Team" printed on the back, listing the names of various support staff, maintenance workers, janitors, security personnel, and cafeteria workers. Miguel's name was among them. When asked about the shirts in the pre-game interview, Anthony explained, "Championship organizations value everyone who contributes. The guys washing our uniforms, preparing our meals, keeping our facility clean, they matter to our success. We wanted to recognize that." The story quickly went viral, picked up by national sports media as an example of team culture done right. But for Anthony, the most meaningful impact wasn't the positive press. It was the change he witnessed within the organization itself. After the Nuggets game, a hard-fought victory for the Timberwolves, Anthony found himself in conversation with Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert in the locker room. "You know," Towns said, "my dad always told me you can tell a lot about someone's character by how they treat people who can't do anything for them. What you did with Miguel, that showed real leadership, Ant." Gobert nodded in agreement. "In Utah, I had a similar experience. One of our security guards had great insights about opponent tendencies that none of the coaches had picked up on. Sometimes the people watching from the shadows see more than anyone else." Anthony shrugged. "Just did what made sense. My mom and grandmother cleaned office buildings at night when I was growing up. Hardest workers I knew never got the respect they deserved." As the conversation continued, Miguel entered the locker room with his cleaning cart, prepared to begin his post-game routine. This time, instead of being invisible, he was greeted by name by several players. Coach Finch pulled him aside to discuss an observation Miguel had made about the Nuggets' defensive rotations that had helped them exploit a weakness during the game. Anthony watched the interaction, a subtle smile on his face. He recalled the words his grandmother had spoken to him years ago. "How you treat people who can't do nothing for you. That's who you really are when nobody's looking." As it turned out, people had been looking, and the culture shift that began with one simple act of respect had transformed not just how the organization functioned, but how it felt to be part of it. The following week, the Timberwolves organization announced a new employee recognition program and scholarship fund for the children of support staff, named the Edwards Initiative. The first recipient would be Miguel's granddaughter, who dreamed of becoming a sports physical therapist. When reporters asked Anthony about having the program named after him, he shook his head. "Should have named it after Miguel. He's the one who showed us all what loyalty and dedication really look like." The team continued its winning streak, climbing the Western Conference standings with a newfound unity and purpose. And while sports analysts debated the factors behind the Timberwolves' surge, Anthony's improved three-point shooting, their defensive adjustments, the coaching strategy, those inside the organization understood that sometimes the most profound changes begin with a simple choice: seeing the humanity in someone others have overlooked. For Anthony Edwards, it hadn't been about creating headlines or building his personal brand. It had been about something his mother and grandmother had taught him long before he became an NBA star. That dignity isn't determined by a paycheck or a job title, but by how you treat others and how you allow others to be treated around you. In the end, the most stunning thing about what Anthony did wasn't the public recognition or the program that bore his name. It was that in a world that often celebrates the wrong things, he had used his platform to celebrate what truly matters, the worth and contribution of every person, regardless of their position or title. And that, more than any highlight reel dunk or game-winning shot, would be his most enduring legacy.